This is B4, where we're looking at the connection between photosynthesis and the structure of leaves, and just bringing in respiration again. I know I mentioned it briefly in the last presentation, but I really need to stress the point that respiration is the reverse of photosynthesis. So during the day, light is available from the sun, so plants are able to photosynthesize, taking in carbon dioxide to make glucose and release oxygen as a byproduct. During the night, plants continue to respire. This is really important, absorbing oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. Respiration is a reverse of photosynthesis, and as I've mentioned. Okay. Now, I need to have another look at the leaves, because we've talked about what actually happens with photosynthesis, but we actually need to look at the structure of the leaves, and we need to talk about why they are specially adapted to do their job, because this is a very common exam question, and you really need to be able to use the correct key terminology here. Plant cells contain chloroplasts, a large central vacuole and a cell wall. As I said earlier, those are the features that distinguish them between plants and animals. Leaves are the food factories of the plant. This is where nearly all the photosynthesis happens. So they are specially adapted to be super efficient, and there's lots of adaptations that you need to know about. Many of the leaves are broad and flat, giving a large surface area to absorb as much light as possible. The leaves are thin, providing a short diffusion pathway for carbon dioxide to diffuse to the mesophyll and the palisade cells. The leaf cells contain chlorophyll and other pigments that absorb energy from different parts of the spectrum. The cells of the palisade layer are neatly packed in rows to fit more cells in. The veins contain the vascular bundles, and these form a network that supports the leaf blade. They also carry water from the root to the leaf and carry the soluble sugars away, and that's where we looked at the xylem earlier, and we're going to look at the xylem and the phloem in more detail. There are plenty of stomata, which are the pores in the lower epidermis, which allow carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. Guard cells control whether they are open or closed. The upper palisade layer, which receives the most light, contains the most chloroplasts. There are air spaces in the spongy mesophyll layer to allow carbon dioxide to diffuse from the stomata to the palisade cells. The air spaces inside the leaf give a large surface area to volume ratio, which allows maximum absorption of gases, and the epidermis is transparent. Now, from those descriptions there, the adaptations, you could hear that I was actually talking about the part of the cell and its actual job, what actually happens there. And it's no good just saying, oh yeah, the gas is allowed in. You have to be very specific and say the carbon dioxide is allowed to diffuse across the distance, and things like that. One thing I do want to mention is that you do have several chloroplast pigments, which means that the chlorophyll can absorb light across a great range of colour wavelengths. Okay, you've got chlorophyll A, you've got chlorophyll B, and you've got carotenoids. Okay, so let's move on. So if we have a look at the leaf structure then, this is just a cross-section diagram of one that I showed you previously, and you can see there you've got your cuticle that sits on the top, the waxy layer which restricts water loss. It's a bit like if you got a leaf and you covered it in Vaseline on one side, it means you'd be creating a barrier and you'd stop the water from being able to diffuse out. Then you've got your see-through transparent upper epidermis, as I mentioned. You've then got your palisade cells all neatly lined up. Then you've got your spongy mesophyll, which contains a lot of air spaces connected to the stomata to ensure the optimum exchange of gases Very common exam question where they say, what are the gaps for? The lower epidermis contains most of the stomata. Think about epidermis as like skin. So the lower skin, the lower epidermis, contains most of the stomata, and they're the gaps that allow the diffusion of gases in and out of the cell. Guard cells are the ones that actually control the size of the stomata to restrict water loss. And sometimes you'll find if a plant is really struggling and is losing too much water on a particularly hot day, then it could be that the guard cells actually close to protect the plant. Vascular bundles contain the xylem and the phloem to transport water and sugars throughout the leaf. So the xylem bring the water up to the leaf, to the places where photosynthesis takes place, and the phloem transports the glucoses up and down the leaf, because remember, once the sugars have been made, the glucose has been made, they get transported down to a sink where they get stored, and then when they're needed again, they're taken out of storage and then they're used during respiration to give the plant its energy so that the plant can produce seeds and the plant can move its leaves and sense things. They also have the leaves also have the large internal surface area to volume ratio, which improves the rate of gaseous exchange between photosynthesizing cells and the air spaces. So really, my sort of tips here are to make sure you know the structure of the leaf and to make sure you know how to explain that it is adapted to its job using correct terminology, because that is what you'll be marked on.